All right, the verdict said, what are the top 5 closing complaints against you and others and how to fix them? You might not even know. It might not be on your radar, but it is on the radar of your prospects. That's one of the fun things I get to do. I get to interview people after they've lied to you, after they've fled, after they haven't called you back, after they've been offended, things that you're doing that's causing resistance. Let's get into those top 5 closing complaints because we all sell for a living. We all have to seal the deal. Let's get into it.
Maximize your influence. Kurt Mortensen is the author of Persuasion IQ, Laws of Charisma, and the best-selling book, Maximum Influence.
Welcome back to Maximize Your Influence. Kurt Mortensen here. This is podcast 536. A little squeaky this week. Been doing some training here and there. More Zoom than I like to do, some face-to-face, and one of my favorites, persuasive presentation coaching. Hey, you want to be more charismatic. You want to close with confidence. You want to get past just informing and influence. Hey, send me an email at kurt@maximizeyourinfluence.com. That's also the email to send your articles, your humor, your suggestions to the show. Remember, anything we use on the show, you get the gold version of influenceuniversity.com for free. So tell your family and friends about the podcast. We can be found on Spotify, iTunes, iHeartRadio, and podcast aggregators near you, or at least on the internet. Let's kick it off with the Persuasion Ninja and the Persuasion Blunder. Now, it's not a blinja. They're not together where you decide. These are separate. I got to go around with some high-end negotiators this past week. It was taking notes, obviously, what was done really well, which happens, and what doesn't. And I've been spending a lot of time studying psychopaths, not the murderer types, but there are a lot of psychopaths out there that negotiate, that are in politics, that are surgeons, that are stockbrokers, that have no emotion in the game, which can be a good thing. You don't want your stockbroker or brain surgeon to be highly emotional. So the blunder is a lot of buyers, a lot of negotiators, they're good at EQ. They can read it, but they just don't care about it. Pass the gravy and I really like you mean the same thing to them on their emotional scale. So I was with this one negotiator, and this buyer was just pushing those emotional buttons. Everything from politics, which I don't know why you're bringing up in the negotiation, to the company, to the industry, to the economy, and this guy just let it go. We see this in politics all the time. People push the buttons and people just say stupid things, get out of control. People see they're out of control, they lose a lot of credibility. So that was the blunder. Don't let people push your buttons, make you angry. And we're going to talk about anger in negotiation, how sometimes it can work when done the right way. Number 1, it hurts your ability to think logically. Number 2, it's a lot of fun for the other person to see that they won the game. They got you out of control. And C, you're never going to get the best deal. They have the upper hand. That is the blunder. Some people, as you know, members of your family love to do this. Push your buttons, get an emotional reaction. It is fun for them. So you got to take a deep breath, know why they're doing it, not let it get to you. Prepare yourself ahead of time that they're going to try to get you out of control, to try to get you frustrated, angry, or full of resentment, or lose emotional control. So work on your EQ. Remember, EQ is not just reading other people's emotions. EQ is also understanding and dealing with your own emotions. The ninja, this was a different person, a different negotiation scenario, did the research. One of the biggest blunders in negotiation is you're just so busy, you just show up, and you're not prepared. In negotiation and persuasion influence, you're paid with your time up front or lost money on the deal. Either you didn't get the sale or you didn't get the best terms during the negotiation. And this person knew more than the buyer because the buyer kept saying, no, I don't think that's true. He says, well, on page 7 of your, I think it was the corporate manual. And another time, well, on your homepage it says, well, that's a true statistic because that comes from the National Association of. That set the tone, that set the standard, that person had done their research, they know their stuff, and actually sealed a really good deal. So you decide next time you negotiate, you're going to be the blunder and lose the deal or get a poor deal, or you're going to be the ninja and spend the time and do it right and get the best deal possible. Now I get it, you're busy. I get it. But if you want the best deal, you got to spend the time. Sometimes you don't have the time. You got to do the best you can. But when you have the time, use the time. Or with this ninja did, had some staff do the research and help him out close a great deal. So do it. Make it happen. You've got this. You know you can do this. Everything you want in life is on the other side of persuasion, negotiation, and influence. And we do it every day. Which brings us to our geeky scholarly articles. The first one, Deal or No Deal, the role of emotions in negotiating offers. We talked about that. Can it help? Can it hurt? We talked about how it can hurt. This research was done by Columbia University and Physiological Science. And they say the same things. We negotiate every day. And so they're looking at skilled negotiators. Should they just simply go with their gut instinct, that feeling, those subconscious triggers, or be extremely calculating? Figure out all the possible numbers and outcomes before settling on the best options. Which one should you do? So they looked at that, what they call interplay of emotion and reason or logic in every deal making. And so they designed a series of laboratory experiments to see if people who trust their feelings and those who do not handle themselves differently in the art of negotiation. Now, if you've been in negotiation, you've heard the classic negotiation game called the ultimatum game. This is where one person, they call the proposer, is given a cash amount, let's say $100. And he has a partner there. So there's the proposer and the partner. And the proposer is told, you can divide it up with the second person any way you like. But here's the catch. Accept the offer or reject it entirely. No negotiation is allowed. If the second person rejects what the first person's going to offer, the proposer, both players walk away with nothing. So they looked how emotions influence deal making. And the researchers, as they do, manipulated how much participants trusted their feelings before they played the ultimatum game. They asked some of the participants to think of 2 occasions in their past when trusting their feelings to make a decision resulted in good outcomes. And most people found that pretty easy to do. Other participants were told to think of 10 occasions when trusting their feelings to make a decision resulted in poor outcomes, making them a little wary of trusting their feelings. So the participants who were more confident in following their emotions offered somewhat less money than others, felt good, and the logic group was more on estimating the player's possible reactions, calculating possible payoffs, using the logic side. Remember, I'm given $100. I can give you $10, $20, and you're ahead of the game, but a lot of people, human emotions, get upset. So no, it should be 50-50. And the proposer can give whatever they want. But remember, there's no negotiating here. You take it or leave it. So some proposers, I'll give you $20, you're ahead of the game. They wouldn't take it, so they both lose. So what they found is the participants primed to trust their emotions, saw that the transaction was simple and cleaner. Rather, those that are trusting the logic got more complex, abstract, and cognitively demanding. The researchers believe that the emotional negotiators actually have an easier time visualizing the offer itself. So here's what's interesting. The negotiators who were guided by their emotions did about the same as those that trusted the logic, suggesting that emotional decision-making may not only be simpler, but also may be more lucrative. Because it was simpler, it was faster, and had the same success. So what's the answer here? Emotion, logic? The answer is yes, you should use both. Follow the instinct, follow the gut. Make sure you've done your research, you know your numbers. It has to feel right, and the numbers have to match. That's a great negotiation. Now, I want to bring up another study that we have talked about before about anger negotiation. I talked about the negative side, but Rice University and the Journal of Experimental Psychology, and these links will be posted at maximizeyourinfluence.com. Everything we talk about the show, the special, the services, and specifically for this podcast, it's 536. So basically, this negotiating found that people out of control, high-intensity anger get smaller concessions, but moderate, I'll call it sternness, moderate intensity anger gets better concessions. So it all depends on the intensity of the emotional display. So when people are out of control, turning red, spitting all over the place, needing a break hurts the negotiations, hurts the concessions. But in control anger, no, we're not going there, we're not doing this, being stern. A little anger, no, we've talked about that. seems to be okay when it's in control. And that's the bottom line. Out of control anger, high intensity, hurt concessions, in control, medium intensity anger, received better concessions. Again, those articles are posted on the website. We talk a lot about negotiation, and negotiation is very different than persuasion. The rule is you always persuade first, negotiate second. Persuasion and influence, you bring someone to your point of view. You bring them all the way up. Negotiations, give, take, you meet somewhere in the middle. And one of the big mistakes of negotiation is people go there too fast. This is a persuasion point. We're not negotiating this. If they're trying to get you to do something that's against your morals or integrity, no, that's a persuasion point. You stick to it. And usually most people at the end respect you for it. But let's get into the persuasion, influence, and even sales training today. So closing is not my favorite thing to talk about, but a lot of people like to talk about it. Get them to say, yes, you're making the close, you're sealing the deal. I prefer seal the deal. I think a lot of ways closing, you've heard me say this before, is like getting a kiss after a bad date. If you haven't done everything else right, they don't like you, they don't trust you, a clever close is not going to help you out. See, old school persuaders in the past used a lot of closing because people didn't have access to a lot of information. Maybe they didn't have the internet. Maybe all the information they needed wasn't available out there, and so a lot more aggressive selling was used. But things have changed to more of the consultative approach, understanding human nature approach, making it a win-win approach. So sales and influence has changed dramatically over the past 20 years. So here are their top 5 complaints and how to fix them. Now, these aren't from salespeople. These are from your prospects, people you're trying to influence and persuade and sell. Big one, whether it's true or not, this is how they feel, not listening to their needs. Because a lot of times the salesperson is so concerned about the data dump, telling the prospect what they should do, it comes across that they're not listening. When the prospect asks a question, they interrupt because they know the answer, and it comes across like they are not listening. Or phubbing, we've talked about that. When your cell phone buzzes or your email dings and you look at it, you lose that eye contact. Great salespeople, as you know, they listen more than they talk. That's why introverts are now more persuasive than extroverts. And here's the secret. When you can listen and ask the right questions, they'll tell you everything you need to know to persuade and sell them, or you can just guess and throw those persuasion darts and hoping something sticks. Regardless, the customer or the prospect needs to feel you get them, you understand them, you listen to their needs. They feel that you get them, that it's not one size fits all, that you have to have this product or service. It's the only one that's going to work. You have to spend the time. In sales, in this situation, slow is fast. And another thing that can help with listening is the preparation, doing your research, knowing the company, knowing your past interactions with the company, knowing how they interact with your industry, preparing your questions, mentally preparing yourself to listen, even when you want to interrupt, goes a long way. My secret is just a pad of paper. Hey, may I take notes? They love it. And every time you have a thought, a concern, want to interrupt, write it down and your brain will kind of go, And you probably won't get to it, but it's there if you need it. Number 2, you can guess this one, pushy and being too aggressive. The customer may feel pressured. You have to do it today. We have to close today. There's no other options. It's only valid if you do it now. Some of the cheesy scarcity, urgency tactics that people use, they could be true, but if they don't feel true, if they feel forced, they feel aggressive, then you're going to trigger resistance in that potential customer. So be careful. It used to be the day you could push really hard and put a little pressure, and it's good to a certain point, but most salespeople are using way too much. So what's the solution? Be more the consultant. Use internal pressure. If you ever studied the law of distance and maximum influence, help them persuade themselves. Help them realize they need to do this today, right now. Let the customer feel that they're making an informed decision rather than being forced into it. Hey, people love to buy. They just don't want to be sold. So keep up the trust. Keep up the rapport, build that relationship, be the consultant, make them feel like they've made the decision. You're still using a little pressure, but you're triggering the pressure inside them instead of your external force, your external pressure. And number 3, using acronyms, jargon, industry terms, complex language that they don't get. The confused mind says no. Hey, use it all day long. You hear it all day long. Makes perfect sense to you. But if you're dealing with another industry, another department, another company, they don't get those terms. And very few people will say, I don't get it. Can you explain that to me? No one wants to feel dumb. It goes back to our school days. So you need to make sure the terms and the jargon that you're using don't lead to confusion and frustration. You make sure you explain everything clearly. And in sales, simple is always more persuasive than complex. So use clear, everyday terms. Now, this is also true with analogies they don't get or visual aids, especially those graphs, those charts that nobody really gets. And keep the door open for them to ask, well, can you explain that? And then you say, I apologize. I could have explained that better. Thank you for asking that question. Thank you for bringing that up. Keep the door open for more questions, more clarifications, and they don't feel dumb. Okay, next one. Failing to address questions, objections, and concerns properly. You thought you did a good job, but your customer, your prospect, expresses, a little resistance, some hesitation, raises an objection. I'm worried about the warranty. I'm worried about the maintenance costs. I'm worried about the quality. And the salesperson could say something like, well, that's not something you should worry about. They're just fine. Okay, that didn't address it. That could be true, but you still have to address it. You take all objections seriously. In fact, go to the archives. We talk a lot about objections, real objections, knee-jerk objections, the right way to handle objections, and address them with empathy. Don't be all put off that they ask something you've already addressed. They ask something you don't want to talk about. They ask something that might not be a true concern for you. Then offer a solution. Don't say that's not an issue. You shouldn't worry about it. That's not a legitimate objection. If they're worried about warranty or cost, you need to address that objection. And number 5, overpromising or misleading information. Now, those in sales probably don't mean to overpromise. Some salespeople do that, and then misleading information. So when a salesperson claims that a product has certain features or warranty that it doesn't offer, and the customer finds out later, they feel deceived. Anytime they feel deceived, that you trigger distrust, you're going to get returns, complaints, no return phone calls, and a lot of resistance. Be honest, be transparent. Every once in a while, you might need to say, I don't know, let me look it up. A lot of salespeople feel this tension. They need to know all the answers. Not necessarily. Wow, let me double check that and send you an email. Let me cover that next time we meet. Your customer will appreciate that. I mean, the best case scenario is to know the answer. But if you make up an answer and they find out that's the wrong answer, that's a lot worse than, let me get back to you next time. Let me send you an email on that. Let them know you're going to confirm, you're going to follow up. You want to make sure you're being 100% accurate. Things have changed. You want to look at the specs. You want to talk to the engineers. Customers are more likely to buy when they feel the salesperson is trustworthy and transparent. And I put in that same category the big complaint, the lack of follow-up, or the promise of follow-up. If you say, I'll send an email tonight, you better email it tonight. I'll get you that information. You better get them that information. So as a salesperson or a persuader, establish a routine that every night you send those emails out. You're on top of it. You are dependable. You are predictable. Customers love salespeople that are dependable and predictable that they can trust. So there you have it, top 5, not listening, being pushy and aggressive, being too complex with your language, your jargon, the way you address concerns and objections, and overpromising or giving misleading information. So there you have it. That's podcast 536. Appreciate your input, your loves, your support, your participation in the trainings. Let's offer a special. I talked about it earlier. Are you just presenting, but are you persuading? Anybody give a presentation, but I want you to be a closer. I want you to get the yes. So what you need to do, completely free, take your presentation IQ. I'll put the link under podcast 536. It'll also be at presentationiq.com. It'll take you a few minutes. It's 10 questions. Helps you with my research as far as trends, Helps me identify your strengths and your weaknesses, and for doing that, I'll give you for free the Perfect Presentation webinar. There are downloads, there's structure, not only how to create it, but how to deliver it. There's no such thing as a boring topic, only a boring presenter. So click on the link in your email or go to presentationiq.com. Become a better negotiator, a better persuader, better influencer. Be aware what your customers are complaining about. Fix it, become a better closer, and go out and persuade with power.